Anti-Cruelty projects. For more than 30 years, Dr. Lockwood has worked with the humane societies and law enforcement agencies, serving as an expert on the interaction between people and animals. Stay with us and learn about this field of justice that tears at the hearts of all of us. Folks, you are watching ForensicWeek.com, a talk show that features real forensic science by real forensic scientists and educators, real law enforcement officers and investigators, and real counterintelligence experts who find, collect, and examine forensic evidence in the performance of their duties. Broadcast live on your desktop and mobile devices every Thursday evening right here, 7 to 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on .forensicweek.com. We are a proud member of the Hangout10.com live TV webcast network, which is a series of shows just like this one, recorded and broadcast live using Google+, a social networking service. Forensic IQ Update Report is a segment of the show where my student interns from the University of Maryland keep you up on current issues and events and training opportunities that are important to the forensic and criminal justice communities, all posted on the Forensic IQ website blog. Student producers and interns with us this evening are from the George Washington University Department of Forensic Sciences, Laura Pachuki, our producer. From Stevenson University in Baltimore County, Maryland, Derek Wong, our co-producer, and also the person who tells me when my microphone is on mute. And my three interns from the University of Maryland, criminal justice majors, Noel Andres, Alicia Terrell, and Walter Tate. Before I introduce our guest and begin this evening's discussion, let's hear from our producer, Laura Pachuki. Laura?
Thanks, Tom. Hi, everyone, and thank you for watching ForensicWeek.com. If you are watching the show live right now and you have questions for our guest, you can leave a comment below, and we will bring that up on air for you and ask Dr. Lockwood for you. If you're watching this show archived 24/7 online and you have any questions, comments, or suggestions for a future idea, you can email us at forensicweek@gmail.com. You can also search for us on Facebook by searching the ForensicWeek.com show and like and share our page. Back to you, Tom.
Thank you, Laura. It is my distinct pleasure to introduce our guest this evening, Dr. Randall Lockwood. He comes to us from Falls Church, Virginia. I first met Dr. Lockwood at the American Academy of Forensic Science meeting in Seattle, where we were both attending the general section business meeting, where he expressed an interest in being a guest on our show, and we didn't waste any time, and we're lucky enough to have him here this evening. He joined the ASPCA in 2005 and is currently the Senior Vice President of the Society's Forensic Sciences and Anti-Cruelty projects. Prior to joining the ASPCA, he was Vice President at the Humane Society of the United States, a post he held from 1984 to 2005. Dr. Lockwood has his PhD in psychology from Washington University in St. Louis and was assistant professor in the psychology departments of the State University of New York at Stony Brook and Washington University at St. Louis. He has testified in numerous trials involving cruelty to animals or the treatment of animals in the context of other crimes, including dogfighting, child abuse, domestic violence, and homicide. Dr. Lockwood serves as an official advisor on animal-related crimes to the New York State Police and is on the advisory boards of the National Center for the Prosecution of Animal Abuse and the Association of Prosecuting Attorneys Animal Cruelty Advisory Council. He holds a city council appointment on the Baltimore, Maryland Anti-Animal Abuse Commission, the first such permanent city commission in the U.S. addressing all forms of animal cruelty in that city. He serves on the board of the National Veterinarian Forensic Sciences Association. He is a fellow at the Oxford Center for the Animal Ethics and the Denver University Center for the Human-Animal Interaction. He is currently an affiliate associate professor Small Animal Clinical Sciences at the University of Florida College of Veterinary Medicine. Dr. Lockwood's co-authored several books, and I'll address them right here, because if you're interested in this subject, you need to look at these books. Cruelty to Animals and Interpersonal Violence, as well as Forensic Investigation of Animal Cruelty, a guide for veterinary and law enforcement professionals. Investigating and Prosecuting Animal Abuse, a guidebook on safer communities, safer families, and being an effective voice for animal victims, and Animal Cruelty and Freedom of Speech, When Worlds Collide. He authored Prosecuting Animal Cruelty for the National District Attorneys Association, as well as Dogfighting Toolkit, addressing dogfighting in your community. Ladies and gentlemen, when we have a subject that we want to discuss, we try to get the best we can, and I believe we have one of the best this evening. I'd like to introduce to you Dr. Lockwood. Dr. Lockwood, thank you so much for being with us this evening.
Thank you for having me and having this chance to talk to your students and anyone else interested.
Absolutely. And, you know, we have a lot of students out there listening, and we have a lot of criminal justice professionals, law enforcement professionals, who need to better understand. And what better way? You know, again, a webcast allows us to bring people like you to talk about the subject, straight scoop. This is not rehearsed. Although we're being recorded, we're live right now. I've got to start with the first question, Dr. Lockwood. How does a PhD in psychology decide to spend over 30 years in the humane societies that you've dedicated your professional life to?
I started out, actually, my dissertation work originally was actually studying wolves in Alaska, studying social structure, social behavior, aggressive behavior. And one of the consequences of that was I also saw some of my own animals being literally shot out from under me while I was doing my research as part of aerial hunting campaigns. That kind of politicized me, got me involved in environmental protection. I was on the board of Defenders of Wildlife, got to know other people in animal enterprises in the Washington area, and eventually gravitated towards Humane Society. And my other work, my other area, was when I wasn't spending time watching wolves, I got interested in child abuse and the care of pets in child abusing families, and began to see how all of these different forms of violence, whether it was domestic violence, animal cruelty, child abuse, and general criminality, they were often very interconnected, often dealing with the same perpetrators.
Generally, the general public recognizes that there are laws against animal cruelty, and people are being brought to justice. What they don't know is who's doing that, and who are these people, what's their background and training, and how does that get done. So let's talk a little bit about the ASPCA and their role. You are responsible, or the Senior Vice President for the Forensic Sciences and Anti-Cruelty projects. Tell us what that means.
What that means is my main role is actually educating people in law enforcement and veterinary medicine, the people who actually are seeing firsthand the animal victims of crimes against animals and the perpetrators. ASPCA was well positioned to work on these issues because we have law enforcement authority in the state of New York for enforcing New York's animal cruelty laws, and have been doing that since 1866. Just this year, we actually began turning over that authority back to the New York Police Department. So we went from having about 25 agents tracking down animal cruelty cases to now having the resources of 34,000 NYPD officers. That means doing a lot of training for police officers, not just in New York, but around the country, on knowing the laws protecting animals, knowing the elements of crimes against animals, and kind of forensics 101 that's a little bit different in dealing with animal cases, because you're dealing with a different kind of something that's both the victim of the crime, but it's also still considered property, but you can't stick the fighting dog in the evidence locker the way you would the drugs you seize.
Let's make sure we understand the jurisdictional. You mentioned that there was a time in New York where the ASPCA had law enforcement authority.
Right.
Were they the only ones that were enforcing these type of laws?
No, technically, the laws were basically to be enforced by regular police officers. Our law enforcement unit, our humane law enforcement, were regular police officers with a specialty in animal cruelty. That's the case in a number of cities around the country. One of my goals for the last several years has been to make the recognition, investigation, and prosecution of animal cruelty a mainstream part of regular policing. And a key to that has been recognizing that often the people involved in crimes against animals are involved in a lot of other crimes as well. Interpersonal crimes, drug crimes, weapons crimes, and that's gotten the attention of law enforcement. So we spend a lot of time training police, prosecutors, judges, and veterinarians. Yeah.
I've been a police officer, and then I've been in the federal law enforcement, or federal counterintelligence arena. Agencies tend to not want to share a lot of responsibility. They tend to want to keep it to themselves and say, "Okay, thank you, I've got it." What's the relationship with generally across the country with the ASPCA in the resources you have to help law enforcement? Are they accepting your support?
Absolutely, and I think as they come to trust us more, realizing that we recognize their authority first. We're there to advise and consult and do the special things we do. We've worked with the ATF in dogfight raids in Virginia. We've worked with the FBI. We've worked with the USDA, and generally what we do is we try to educate local, state, and federal agencies to what expertise we have, particularly in the unique area of veterinary forensics, and how we can help. And a good example is a couple of weeks ago when we did the largest cockfight raid in New York City history in the Bronx, and after the 70 people were arrested in the basement of this building, and it was in Queens, basically they just sort of turned the crime scene over to us and said, "Okay, you guys take it from here." We took care of the animals, we documented the scene, we packed up the evidence, and then we deliver that all to the prosecutors. So they don't want to necessarily be handling animals or handling animal-related evidence, and we don't want to step on their toes, and we don't want to deal with the drugs and the guns and stuff. So it's actually worked out quite well, and I think once they've gotten to see us in action, recognizing that we have a lot of people on our teams, most of whom have come from regular law enforcement, from homicide investigation or elsewhere, that we know what we're doing, but we know the special aspects of crimes involving animals.
When a report if I saw a crime, animal cruelty situation, and I called my county police, which is Howard County Police here in Maryland, would they respond to it, or would they be calling the ASPCA?
Well, probably what they would do is, hopefully, depending on the nature of the crime, if it were a dogfighting crime, or let's say domestic violence scene where an animal had been injured or killed, presumably they would call their local humane society or SPCA, if many of which do have trained animal cruelty investigators who may or may not have any law enforcement authority. If it rises to the next level, let's say there is some special evidence that's needed, we had a case in Baltimore where police were responding recently to a domestic violence dispute. In the process of resolving that, they found a bleeding dog in a closet. They thought it had just been injured, called animal control and took that in. Only then did they realize that once it got to the shelter, this dog had been stabbed multiple times. They then called me and said, "What do we do?" I said, "Get a search warrant, go back to the apartment, find the knife," which they did. And that's actually moving through the court system right now.
That's wow. I worked on a Discovery Channel documentary of a guy who killed his wife down in Florida, and to make it look real that somebody broke in and killed his wife, he also beat up his 2 dogs.
Right.
With I don't know if you might, I don't know if you, it was on Discovery
Right.
several times, and I mean one of the 2 dogs was his personal close dog, and
Yeah.
they both had to be put down eventually. But it was interesting because they were trying. The big question in the trial was whether the blood spatter on his pants was caused by him hitting his wife over the head, or whether it was the wife's blood on the dogs. You know, and you know when the dog
Right.
shakes off liquid, you know, when they're wet. So that became a big issue. Like it mattered. The guy killed his wife, and he was convicted, and that's the end of that. But typically, defense looks for something other than the obvious, and tries to capitalize on that.
And we actually do.
Let's talk.
I was going to say we
sorry.
actually do training at University of Florida in blood spatter evidence. We do a 3-day course once or twice a year, specifically for veterinarians and humane investigators, and actually do have a trained analyst on our staff.
That's wild. That's wild. Now, the Humane Society and the ASPCA, 2 different organizations?
2 different organizations. ASPCA was the first animal protection organization actually in the Western Hemisphere, going back to 1866. Humane Society of the U.S. was founded back in 1954, so it's a relative newcomer. They are large in terms of membership. They're primarily these days interested in legislation, litigation. ASPCA has always also had an emphasis on veterinary medicine and law enforcement. We also run the Animal Poison Control Center. We employ actually more veterinary toxicologists than the federal government. We handle about 150,000 calls a year of animal poisonings. Most of those are accidental, but we get about 3% of those are intentional poisonings, so we've got expertise there as well.
You know, I mentioned to you we had Dr. Gary Pizzillo from Iowa on, and he talked about how in his profession he's come across racehorses that you know, they weren't winning anymore, and all of a sudden they were suffocated, or you know, had their legs broken, and a lot of these things went uninvestigated because people didn't. Obviously, if I'm the one who, you know, victimized my animal, and I'm the one to find him, I'm going to dig a hole, and that's the end of it. Although no, that's not the case, because they were doing it for insurance money.
Right.
Do you see a lot of that, where animals
Not a lot.
that?
We haven't. I had thought we might be called in on more cases like that. I think partly people are realizing that there is expertise now to detect those kinds of things. We also do a class in clandestine grave identification and excavation. We used to hear a lot from veterinarians that, oh, this animal was dead and buried, we can't get any useful information out of that, and then I'll show them slides of you know, cat mummies from Egypt where I can tell you how they were killed. So I said, there's no such thing as an animal that's too decomposed or too long dead that you might not get some useful information out of. But we haven't seen a lot of insurance type cases yet. I think we still might.
I would think that the insurance companies would be looking to people like you to help them when they're getting ready to pay off big, and I doubt seriously they have the expertise. They would have to come to people like you.
Right. I mean, one of the areas that we do occasionally see, you know, barn fires, that kind of things, and we've actually had some lengthy discussions on how one could distinguish between looking for signs of inhalation injuries and things in horses. It hasn't come up yet, but we're actually kind of training in anticipation of getting cases that might need that kind of expertise.
Okay. So what What you're telling us is that the big push right now is for you to get out there and train law enforcement in general to better understand and appreciate the type of evidence, the crime scenes, what to look for,
Right.
And to better understand the laws and how to prove them. Okay, and that you have a large group of professionals that are part of the ASPCA, investigators, response teams, etc. So let's learn a little bit about them, who they are, what they do.
Sure.
I know when I went on your website, and Laura, what I like to start off with the field investigations and response team. If you could put that up so our viewers could at least just see where that is on their website. But tell us a little bit about the field investigators or investigations. Who does these? What's their background? Right. So we can get an appreciation for that.
Sure. Our field investigations and response team is spread out across the country, probably about 20 primary people. And it was actually an outgrowth of our involvement about 5 or 6 years ago in the largest dogfight raid in U.S. history that was centered around St. Louis area, but actually involved arrests of in 8 states. There were 22 raids conducted simultaneously in one morning in the summer, and resulted in the seizure of about 500 dogs. The individuals involved have a wide variety of backgrounds. A lot of them were from law enforcement or humane law enforcement. The head of our blood sports investigation group, Terry Mills, is a former highway patrol police officer who was actually an undercover investigator in the Missouri 500 dogfighting investigation that went on for about 18 months. And primarily that team is tasked with going and assisting with large-scale animal cruelty cases, either dogfighting, puppy mills, sometimes large-scale animal hoarding scenes, and cockfighting. We have another major raid last year, again in the southeast, where we seized about 350 dogs, many of which are still in our care in Florida. We then bring in a team of veterinarians. We document the condition of every single animal, thorough veterinary exams. We then do behavior assessments. It's a very eclectic group with a wide set of skills, and it's a hard-working group. One of the things we've gotten good at is responding also to natural disasters. We set up a temporary shelter after Superstorm Sandy in New York. We can actually set up a 40,000 square foot temporary animal shelter in about 4 days and house several hundred animals. We've gotten very good at that kind of emergency service that law enforcement really isn't equipped to deal with.
Well, not only that, I mean, if they're out there trying to save people, they gotta make a decision here.
Right.
You know? So were you guys out in New Orleans?
Yeah, actually, that's that was right after, probably about a week after I started at ASPCA, and actually we learned a lot about emergency veterinary care, mass care, in that. Actually, starting back with Hurricane Andrew, but Katrina really was the wake-up call for a lot of groups. And every time we do a large-scale response, we learn something more. But I think we've gotten very, very good at it. And we've applied what we've learned from reacting to natural disasters to doing things that we might have a little bit more control over. Let's say planning a large-scale dogfight raid or cockfight raid or something like that.
Okay, who's funding you?
We are a charity. We're funded completely by donations. We get very little government funding. Actually, the only government funding we've gotten was a grant from the Department of Justice for me to prepare training materials for law enforcement on dogfighting. But most of our budget, virtually all of it, comes in individual donations, usually $25, $50 at a time from, fortunately, millions of people.
So are you telling me that those very, very sad commercials on television work?
Sarah McLaughlin pays my salary, basically.
Okay.
And also we do have some corporate sponsors. Subaru has their Share the Love campaign, where when you buy a new Subaru, you can make a donation to one of several charities. We're always the top pick. So Subaru's been and they've been very supportive, particularly of our forensics group. They've actually helped pay for special crime scene vehicles. They made us a tricked out forensic response vehicle with lights and sirens and storage for cadavers.
Give us the anatomy of an animal crime scene. Tell us what that looks like.
Sure.
What kind of evidence are you dealing with? What are you looking for? What's different about that kind of a crime scene than any other crime scene where you're focused on human victims?
The big difference, first of all, if you're dealing with a deceased animal, it's not that much different than a homicide scene. And actually, we've been involved in some cases where there have been both human and animal victims, like the one you were alluding to. Actually, one of the first that I got called in on was the Phoenix Sniper a few years ago, where there were two men that had shot several people, but also many, many animals. And the first call that came in was, do you think these are connected, and how should we deal with it? And I said, most likely they are, and treat each animal shooting the way you would a homicide. Do the ballistics, gather the evidence, and that turned out to be actually very important evidence when they did get some ballistics matches and so on. In the case of crimes that involve an injured animal, the difference is if police are responding to domestic violence and someone's been seriously injured or there's been an assault, the police take down the story, and then the person goes off to the hospital, and they're just dealing with that. We get the animal, and we often take care of the animal for weeks, if not months, in addition to documenting its condition. So when we get an animal, let's say a starving animal or an injured animal or a dog that's been in a dog fight, we obviously have to document it on the scene, the condition it was found in, and we then document its change and its progress, and we photograph them and weigh them. So the same skills that basic crime scene analysts are going to use, a lot of photography. If there's blood stain and splatter, if there's trace evidence, we are trained to collect that just as any other forensic scientist would. The difference is we really specialize in trying to relate the injuries or illnesses of an animal to the possibility of a crime. What we try to document is what we call non-accidental injury, because there's always some lame excuse being given. No, this isn't a fighting dog. He ran through the rose bushes. Well, we're pretty good at telling you the difference between the injuries you get under those different conditions. No, I didn't beat this cat. It fell off the bed. Well, we have probably the world's authority on blunt force trauma in animals working for us, who can really tell you the difference. And basically, we try to be the voice of the animals. We try to tell the story. Using the old CSI dictum, let the body speak.
You mentioned you're the voice of the animals. Some of these areas, like dog fighting, cockfighting, I assume that where these events are occurring, all the humans are in favor of the activity.
That's right. Yeah,
so
and actually,
I would imagine that makes it more difficult to conduct an investigation, because I wouldn't imagine anybody's very cooperative.
No, and that's why a lot of these investigations do start out sometimes with undercover investigators, and we will work with the police on training them what to look for. But surprisingly, or maybe not so surprisingly, a lot of our evidence in these cases, or a lot of our tips in dogfight, cockfight cases, come from people on the inside. There's no honor among thieves. They get mad at each other. They get stiffed on a bet or whatever, or they've been busted for something else, and they'll become an informant. So as with any other criminal investigation, we get the information from wherever we can, and often insiders are a good source of that information, help us develop the case.
If you get information first and you forward it to the law enforcement, do they always react?
Well, I think one of the things we try to do is be proactive and make arrangements or make the introductions to appropriate law enforcement people before it's needed. We have a very good working relationship with the NYPD, and we do training starting at the highest levels. It's very important to get buy-in from the top. And the same has been true working in Baltimore, getting the buy-in there. We usually don't just say, gee, you guys ought to be doing this. We try to educate them well in advance. So here's what we can do, and here's really why this needs to be taken seriously. And I think there's appreciation these days that people who hurt animals are not nice, law-abiding people. They're almost invariably involved in a whole lot of other crimes, particularly in dogfighting. There's always drugs. There's usually always weapons. We were kind of sweeping knives up off the floor at the last cockfight, you almost always find drugs. Very often we actually get called in after the fact. Someone's gone in on a drug or weapons case. They find animals there. Maybe it's fighting dogs. In one case recently, there was a whole bunch of venomous snakes that they were keeping as well, illegally. And so a lot of animal crimes are discovered in the course of investigating other crimes, and vice versa.
That's a great segue. You're just talking about venomous snakes. When we talk about animal cruelty, we always seem to focus on dogs. Tell us about the other kinds of animals that you've been involved with that have received the same services and investigative process that the dogs do.
Well, one of the things we do get involved with, which isn't necessarily as closely related to animal violent crimes, is animal hoarding. The people that just have far too many animals than they can care for. The animals are often sick, suffering, dead, and we've seen virtually every species you can imagine being hoarded. We've had people that have hundreds of rats or hundreds of goats. One lady was collecting beavers in her basement.
Beavers?
Beavers. We've had pigeons. We've had tarantulas. We've had
a
lot of lizards.
Now you're a psychologist. All right, tell me, what kind of a person wants to hoard animals to such extents? I mean, what is it that they need? They obviously need something, and it isn't animals.
No, and it's actually just been recognized in the most recent Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, the DSM-5, finally recognizes what they call a hoarding disorder. It is finally seen as a mental disorder. It's probably largely an attachment disorder. Often people have a long history of disordered relationships with people. They're kind of trying to fill that hole in their life with seeing themselves as someone who knows a lot about and cares about animals, but often it's for their detriment.
So does the mental health community, are they engaged in an investigation where somebody's hoarding animals? In other words, at what point does that person who's hoarding animals violate the law, and who decides that?
That's a very good question, because there's been concern that if you try to just throw the criminal justice system at someone who has a mental illness, that you're essentially criminalizing a mental disorder. Although the flip side of that is, as one of my favorite prosecutors says, that mental illness is not a get out of jail free card. That what we try to do is often use the solid evidence of what does constitute a crime of serious animal neglect to get mandated psychological intervention, counseling, and so on, and a long period of probation where you can monitor it. Our approach now, we're currently tracking about 150 animal hoarding cases in New York City, but we've got a team that we call our cruelty intervention advocates, who are primarily social workers who work with law enforcement as well as our veterinarians to monitor situations and also call in mental health and other professionals to really do wraparound services for these. And in that case, prosecution's a last resort.
Well, that's interesting. Yeah, I mean, this whole area of the hoarding in mental health is interesting. It'd be interesting to me because I don't know the law. Animal hoarding is a violation, and how is it? How many animals, or is it?
The case is going to be based on the condition of the animals. And actually, we've looked closely at prosecute cases. In many of the extreme cases, the people are in such denial about the quality of care is they're literally living with dead animals in addition to piles and piles of urine and feces. But we've had cases where there will be dead cats on the dining room table. There will be dead dogs in their bed. And that clearly sends the message even to social services that might want to look the other way that things are not right here. And at that point, if you are allowing an animal to suffer and die, that is a violation of animal cruelty laws.
My goodness, let's just take a little break here. That's interesting, and we'll have our students do our forensic IQ report for a moment, and when we come back, we've got to continue that. I do want to know, are you all is ASPCA? Are you in all 50 states?
We have field service people, and we have other representatives potentially there. We don't have a chapter. We're not related. We're not your local SPCA. Those are all independent groups, like all the humane societies are all independent. But we travel everywhere. I've lectured and helped law enforcement probably in every state in the last 30 years.
Okay, so you do responses. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Let's get our University of Maryland interns up front here and talk a little bit about what's going on. I understand that they've got some information on some new training and a few other stories that they've chronicled. Let's start with you, Alicia.
Okay, hello everybody. I'm going to start with a story I found, very interesting story about there being 400,000 rape kits backlogged in the United States. The Department of Justice did a report on this saying that there were 400,000, and in New York City alone there are 17,000 backlogged arrests rates. No, there's 17,000 backlogged rape kits, and they've only gotten to a few, and they've already increased their rate for rape cases from 40% to 70%. And in Detroit, they have 11,000 backlogged, and they've only gotten to about 10%, and they have about 46 serial rapists from these 11,000, from the 10% of these 11,000 backlogs.
Okay, so what are we going to do about it?
Well, the White House has made a statement that they're going to try to budget in 2015 $35 million to process these unopened rape kits, hoping to make this a little better, but that's still not enough money because some of these rape kits can cost from $500 to $1,500 dollars.
Well, we're going to have John Palucci from New York, who was responsible for oversight of DNA evidence for all New York City, tell us what he thinks about that. But I mean, so that is not a surprise, certainly by the law enforcement community, but it's a positive thing that maybe the White House recognizes it and is going to put some money there, because the bottom line is we need technology to get better and faster, and
cheaper.
And while we're waiting for that, we've got to put dollars into resources to get what we have there. Okay, what else do you have?
The other thing I have is about this company. They're called Agilent Technologies. I'm probably not pronouncing that right, but they sponsor free forensic training, and they have a few dates coming up that I posted. They're on ForensicEd.org, and you can check them out and register for them.
We've got it up on the screen, so the viewers can see it. Very
yeah,
good.
I have 4 of them posted up there that are coming up in the next few months.
Okay, good. Very good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Noel?
Hey everyone, once again it's a pleasure to be here reporting live on ForensicWeek.com. Well, the first article I want to talk about is about the American Academy of Forensic Science, the Roller N. Harger Award. Just last month, supervisor chemist Michael Smith was awarded this award by the American Academy of Forensic Sciences. He was awarded this achievement due to his lifetime achievements and contributions to the field of forensic toxicology during his career of more than 25 years. Throughout his academic and career, he's been chief of forensic testing. He's been a scientific programs officer. He's also an expert medical witness and defense contractor, and he's helped conduct medical research that has been published in more than 90 publications, which include Clinical Chemistry, the Journal of Analytic Toxicology, and the Journal of Forensic Sciences. He's currently the supervisor chemist at Fort George G. Meade, and he oversees drug testing for civilian defense employees. Prior to this, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Oh, well, prior to the 2014 and 2013 recipients, for the last couple of years, nobody had won this award.
What I wanted to say is, you mentioned that he received an award at the American Academy of Forensic Sciences. Yeah. I want you to know that Dr. Lockwood received the Achievement Award at the American Academy of Forensic Sciences meeting this year in recognition of outstanding contributions to the forensic sciences. So congratulations to Dr. Lockwood also.
Thank you.
What else do you have there, my friend?
Well, staying on the topic of the American Academy of Forensic Sciences, at the 2014 Grantees Conference this year, scholars gathered in Seattle, Washington to discuss their research and findings, and they've been invited once again to present their findings, but this time on live webinars. The first of these presentations will include Jillian Ning from the University of California, Davis, and Tony Diegoli from the Armed Forces DNA ID Lab. The live webinars will be available on March 18th, 19th, and 20th at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. Upon completion, each participant will receive a certificate of completion, and although the webinars are 60 minutes long, they will include, topics that are useful for education, and they revolve around forensic science, forensics technology, and forensic toxicology. If you want to register for these dates, you can visit the blog on ForensIQinc.com.
Very good, Noel. And when we get back to our guest, I'm going to let you open up. I know you had a question for him in reference to certain kinds of animals, yes. So I'm going to let you do that. Meanwhile, Walter, you have a very interesting article I'm looking at right now. Tell us a little bit about it.
All right. Well, we all know about using body temperature, other body signs like rigor mortis or discoloration of the skin, and even insects to determine approximate time of death. Well, there's two scientists that are looking to develop technology, or they're trying to research using, it's really cold. Looking to use bacteria as a way to determine time of death. So they're going to start studying the microbiology of human decomposition to understand how bacteria that inhibits a corpse changing over time can be applied to forensic tools.
That'll be good, except that the environment always is that one thing that always affects all that, and it still becomes very difficult. I'm glad you found that. It's always good to see that. Very good. Thank you. All right. Time is going quickly, so fast. So let's, Noel, why don't you ask Dr. Lockwood your question?
Yes. Hi, Dr. Lockwood. Well, I'm a fish enthusiastic, and I have a pet turtle, and I just wanted to know if you ever encountered any wild or exotic animals.
Wait a minute. You have a pet turtle?
Yes, I have a pet turtle.
How big are they?
Well, it's about like 5 inches. The turtle. I got it since it was a baby, but it's about 5 inches.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, and I just wanted to know if Dr. Lockwood has encountered any exotic animals, whether aquatic fishes or turtles.
Right. Well, one of the things, one of the challenges for us in looking at animal cruelty cases is that every state defines animal differently and defines animal cruelty differently, and you've got some states where virtually any animal is covered by the cruelty laws. Others really only apply to mammals, some only to vertebrates. We have had cruelty cases involving fish, and I mentioned we actually had a domestic violence case where the offender, to terrorize and threaten his spouse, had put one of her prize fish down the garbage disposal in front of her. And this was in Colorado, and the prosecutor actually took it very seriously, and he was convicted of animal cruelty, even though they didn't recover the remains, but the court recognized that people can be attached to a wide variety of animals, and sometimes offenders, particularly in domestic violence cases, can use that attachment.
What kind of fish was that?
I'm not sure what kind of fish it was, but it really didn't matter. The folks in that particular DA's office took that seriously. We also had a famous case in Oregon of Victor the lobster. Now, Victor was this enormous lobster being kept at a restaurant on display, one of the biggest lobsters, and someone stole Victor and ran off with him. He was being chased, and during the chase, he actually dropped Victor, who couldn't be repaired, unfortunately, but he was prosecuted not only for theft but for animal cruelty.
Was he eaten?
I don't think so. I think they actually saved his remains and taxidermied him because he was one of the largest lobsters in captivity.
Okay. They say if they're too large, they're not very good anyways. Yeah.
Right. But actually,
well,
I was going to say, go ahead.
I have a question also. Is it hard sometimes to distinguish between discipline and cruelty or abuse?
That's a very good question, because one of the things that we have had, to my knowledge, only 2 or 3 successful prosecutions of dog trainers for abuse, even in cases where they've hung the dog and helicoptered them to the point of causing near blindness. But they usually can find either a satisfied customer or 3 other dog trainers that will testify that that's what you got to do. We did have a case of one dog trainer that was prosecuted for actually using a slingshot wrist rocket to shoot, I think, ball bearings at a dog to discipline it, causing quite serious injury. He was prosecuted for felony animal cruelty. He'd also beaten the dog, I think, with PVC piping. But we had another trainer that had put 2 shock collars around the dog's abdomen and genitals and was trying to train it that way, and was seen doing that in public. But that case kind of fell apart when people who witnessed it didn't want to testify. So it is sometimes difficult, as in child abuse, that fine line. And usually we can't prosecute someone for psychological abuse of an animal, even though we know it can occur. It's very difficult to build a case unless you really can document physical injury.
So does how closely does the ASPCA work with crime labs? Is the process of DNA identification for animals similar to the process for humans?
Yeah, and as what you find is often we'll get a call from a police department saying, we've had this, for example, the dog that was stabbed. Most crime labs, the most they will tell you is it's non-human DNA. They won't try to do a match, or they won't try to identify it as canine DNA. We do use the Maple Center for Forensic Medicine. I just spent just paid a fairly large bill for some of the software for doing DNA analysis in some animal cases, because increasingly it is something that people are asking for. In the case of dogfighting, we've done proof of concept where we can show that these blood stains that we swab off of dogfighting pit can be matched specifically to an injured dog that we've recovered, and we've been able to show that they'll say, no, this wasn't a fighting pit, this was something else, or no, that dog got hurt running through the woods, and we'll say, no, that dog's blood is on that wall, and we have video of this dogfight taking place. So we are building that capability. Also, we have created a canine CODIS where we have several hundred dogs in a DNA database that we've used to link people who claim no relationship with each other, but we've used it to help build conspiracy, where we say this guy says he doesn't know this guy the next state over, but his dog is the father of this guy's dog. So obviously they've had some contact.
Hmm.
I have a question.
I got a great question.
Wait,
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
So I saw on one of those crime scene shows one time, the neighbor had trained their dog to go into their neighbor's house and turn on the gas to the fireplace, in which it killed the neighbor. And I was just wondering if you've ever seen a case where someone has trained their animal to do the killing for them, or any animal cruelty cases such like that.
That I hadn't heard of that one, but we have had, and actually had done an abstract for the Academy of Forensic Sciences. I've had at least 5 cases where people have tried to use a dog attack to conceal a homicide. You know, they've beaten someone to death or killed them in some other way, and then sicked a dog on them to try to alter that. And one of the messages we try to get out often, a medical examiner will say, well, was this a dog attack, was this an accident, or was it a homicide? And I try to get them to realize it could be both, that we certainly have seen that in quite a few cases of using that. Or in some cases we've had a couple of sexual assaults on children which people have tried to blame on the dog. And so that gets into a whole other area. You talked about all the unprocessed rape kits. One of the things we try to do is teach veterinarians how to use a rape kit in an animal sexual assault case.
I got an important. Is that you're done, Laura?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Remember Wayne Williams? Remember the Atlanta murders?
Right.
Back in the 80s, there were 26 young black children killed. He was eventually arrested and convicted for several of them. In all those cases, all those bodies, they found German Shepherd hairs, and they found the green fibers that they were able to determine had the same class characteristics as the green fibers in Wayne Williams' bedroom. Now, back in the this is before DNA was popular, but they were never able to prove that the fibers obviously were the exact fibers from his bedroom. But they had these dog hairs because he had a German Shepherd. Okay. Today, if we had dog hairs on bodies, I would imagine we would be able to do a number of things. Determine, one, it's coming from the same dog, particular dog, and if the hairs exist today on those 26 bodies from the 80s, why don't we look at that? Because that guy Wayne Williams is still telling the world. He was on TV this past week, still saying he never did anything. You know.
And the veterinary genetics laboratory at UC Davis has been involved in a number of those cases involving dog hair evidence. Problem is that as with human hairs, you're much better off if you have a hair with a follicle attached where you can actually extract some DNA. You just have the shaft. You're not necessarily going to get stuff. And also the problem, if we've got 25-year-old, even if you had a hair with a follicle on it, the DNA very well might have degraded depending on the storage. So probably wouldn't be able to go just on the basis of that. But kind of related to that, what I think is interesting, we've had a few cases where someone has been put at the scene of a crime by the fact that the victim's dog peed on his car's tires. And unlike humans, the dogs excrete enough epithelial cells in their urine that you can get DNA from dog urine. And we actually had a case in Canada where the guy said he hadn't been anywhere near the victim's house, but her dog's DNA was on his tires.
Is that right? That's great. I'm looking at the time. That's fantastic. And I need to ask you to talk a little bit about what kind of training is out there
Sure.
for law enforcement officers around the country who may be listening, who might want to realize that, hey, they need to get some skills. Could you tell us a little bit about the online training the ASPCA has right now?
Sure. If you go to aspcapro.org, there are lots of trainings offered through that. Also, we do at least a monthly webinar that's posted there, and also through the National District Attorneys Association on various aspects, and that's primarily for prosecutors, but anyone's open to that. We have online courses on basic animal crime scenes, dogfighting, and so on. Then for more advanced work, we do have a certificate program in veterinary forensic sciences through the University of Florida, and that's going to become a full-blown master's degree program in the fall. So it is the world's first master's program in veterinary forensic sciences. We've already got about 50 students in the certificate program, and it's an interesting blend of veterinarians, vet techs, and law enforcement.
Fantastic. So there's some free training out there for you law enforcement officers who need to better understand and have some extra skills on that unusual or slightly different focus of investigation. Dr. Lockwood, could you tell our listeners, especially the ones that are out there listening to this show because they're trying to find themselves and say, okay, what is it that I want to do? Obviously, they're interested in forensic science, and that's why they would be listening to ForensicWeek.com. If they were interested in working in the area that you have spent your entire professional life in, what should they major in? What should they do? What direction should they take? What focus should they have?
I think most of the people that we have working with us have a good mixed background in both animal sciences, animal behavior, biology, and also forensic sciences or law enforcement. So I say we have a mixture of people that have come in through veterinary pathway or vet tech or basic animal sciences. My pathway in was actually through animal behavior and then human behavior and forensic psychology. But in general, a strong science background, and I would also suggest volunteering with local humane societies or SPCAs, getting some hands-on experience. As part of working an animal crime scene is getting into the mind of the animal, knowing what they would have done in a situation, where they would have run to, where they would hide, and understanding how the suspect's explanation of the facts just doesn't jive with what we know animals do.
You know, I have a very close friend who's a retired FBI agent, and his wife is also a retired FBI agent. She was an animal husbandry major at the University of Maryland, undergraduate, and then she decided to go to the FBI. She loved animal science so much that when she retired from the FBI, she made her and her husband, they bought a farm down in Virginia, and they are raising all kinds of animals, and they love it. But she is a true investigator in heart, and she has all these skills. And I'm wondering, I mean, do you use people like, if she wanted to volunteer time to engage in some of those investigations, do you use people like that?
Absolutely. We actually maintain a database of volunteers. When we do these big deployments for a dogfight scene or whatever, we'll use 75 to 100 volunteers. And actually, the better trained and the more experienced, the better. Absolutely. You check our website. We have a volunteer skill set form, and we would love to have people with that kind of experience, and including students as well.
Well, and how about, do you use interns at all?
We use veterinary interns and externs. We have a few graduate students at University of Florida. We're not really ramped up yet to use interns. We do have externs who, usually veterinarians, who come and spend a couple of weeks actually learning how to perform forensic necropsies with our veterinary staff. These days, through the NYPD, we're doing about a case a day that our veterinarians are documenting the condition of animals coming in, either doing a thorough physical exam or necropsy, and then in the large-scale cases, we might do a couple of hundred exams in a few days with a small team of attending veterinarians, vet techs, and forensic scientists.
Well, if you ever have a need for criminal justice interns, we have over 900 criminal justice majors just in College Park.
Right. Well, also we're very receptive also to helping out if anyone's interested in a dissertation or thesis project that has some animal or animal crime component. I serve on a lot of thesis committees, dissertation committees. Happy to help out. We've got a lot of good resources to help students.
That's great. I'm sitting looking at the clock and I'm saying, oh my God, we've gone over. I gotta say to you, this was fascinating. I enjoyed listening to you, and it was a lot of information that's all new to me, and I really appreciate you being here. Love to have you and maybe some of your colleagues on again to talk about some specific cases, etc. But I thank you so much for being with us today. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Forensic. Okay, my pleasure. You've been listening to ForensicWeek.com. It's been brought to you through the cooperation with the Hangout10.com live TV show network. We hope that the content presented in this show, as well as the previous shows archived here, has opened your mind and curiosity to the wonders of forensic science in criminal justice. Next week is spring break in Maryland. And we've decided that we're going to take a little break, so there will be no show next week, but during next week we'll let you know who our guests are for the following week and in weeks to come. We have a lot of different folks from the American Academy of Forensic Sciences, like Dr. Lockwood, who have shown an interest in being on the show. As you can see, we learned a whole different area of investigations. We hear about animal cruelty, we know it exists, but we never really sit back and say, okay, who's behind the scenes? Who's doing this? Where do they come from? And you certainly got a sense of that today. So I strongly suggest that you get a copy of one of Dr. Lockwood's books to learn more about that. Get on the ASPCA's website and learn more about that. I want to thank you all for watching, and we will see you in 2 weeks on www.forensicweek.com. Thank you.